Alright, so I figured I'd go ahead and make a video of how to do the rear brakes on a 2011 to 2000, I want to say 16, 17 Gsxr 750 for the rear brakes. Basically what you want to do if you want to save the time from having to pull out the axle and drop the rear wheel and dealing with that whole pain in the ass. The way the caliper sits in there, you've got a little nut, bolt and stud with a nut right here. Then you've got a single axle bolt up here, or not axle bolt, caliper bolt. It's a 6mm hex head for that. So you'll need that to be able to get it done. I wasn't able to fit my T-handle in to get that in, so I just grabbed a regular 6mm standard Allen key for it. And then remember, for the actual pads, before you compress the piston, you're going to want to go over here and you're going to want to drop the rear brake fluid reservoir, which you can see just down there. You're going to want to pull out the 8mm bolts here to give you enough room to pull it out, pull off the cap. That way it's got some room to open up and vent, in a sense, for when the fluid goes rushing back. So just keep that in mind when you go to compress the caliper. Once you have it off of the rotor, normally what I do is I'll just grab like a flathead and put it in between the pads and compress the piston that way. Most of the piston compressors, the brake piston compressors that you can get at like AutoZone and whatnot, for cars, they won't fit inside the smaller caliper for the motorcycles. So let me go ahead and open this up here. Give me just a second. There we go. So just try to keep that as upright as possible. Just keep in mind, you don't want to add any brake fluid. You'll never have to add brake fluid unless you're leaking. In my case, I like to bleed my brakes every time I do a brake job on the motorcycles or cars. Just like to give it a couple pumps, make sure it's fresh. Let's see here. Take a flathead, put it in between the pad. And just go real nice and easy with it. You don't want to compress it too fast. Nice and easy does it. I don't know if you guys actually got that or not. Now to actually get the pads out, you have to pull out the ear here, which is a 5mm. I'm just going to use the T-handle for that one. If this is your first time ever doing it, or if nobody's been in there and it hasn't been lost, what'll be covering this ear here will actually be a little, it's like a non-tamper screw. Basically, it just screws in inside of there once you've tightened this down. You just need a flathead to get that out. Never put them in too tight. If you put them in too tight, you'll end up regretting it. They do strip fairly easily. I'm going with EBCs for this brake job. They're cheap, reliable. I've used them for quite a few years now. I go through pads quite a bit. Alright, let's see here. Now remember, when you're dealing with the new pads, you don't want to touch the mating surface there. Now, for the most part, unlike cars, you don't really get a squeaking from the brakes on the motorcycle. There's really no point in putting grease on the back end. It's not pointless. It's just there's no reason to. Usually, the only thing that they recommend that you grease is the actual ear here. There we go, get that in there. Now this is the stud with the nut I was telling you guys about. Just pop that back into here. Now make sure when you're putting it all back together here, make sure you set the pads properly. The pads, much like a car, have little ears that just sit in the position right there. Here, let me see if I can get it better. There you go. Not much for clarity, but you want to get these up in the position. So go ahead and get that up in there. Got to get the other side as well. Alright, and that's pretty much it. And just put the 6mm bolt back in for the caliper.